let's move into Michael Saylor, who obviously is a Bitcoin maximalist. And his statement that the SEC should shut down XRP, Ethereum, Solana, and other altcoins for being unregistered securities. Bitcoin firebrand Michael Saylor says the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission would be right to shut down essentially all altcoins, which he says are being sold as unregistered securities. In a new interview on the PDB podcast, the former chief executive of MicroStrategy says that many altcoins, especially leading smart contract platform Ethereum, are committing securities fraud. Other altcoins he names include ETH rival Solana and XRP, the crypto asset used to operate Ripple Labs' payment platform. Quote, Ripple is an unregistered security. It's pretty obvious. It's a company. The company owns a bunch of XRP. They sell it to the general public, but then they never took the company public, and there's no disclosures. So the SEC's position is you're selling an unregistered security. It's a crypto token. Just like how Ethereum is an unregistered security, it's controlled by a few people in the Ethereum Foundation and consensus. Just like FTT token and just like Solana, they're all unregistered securities. In December of 2020, the SEC sued Ripple Labs under allegations that the company was selling XRP as an unregistered security. The case is still ongoing, but Saylor says that the SEC should shut down all of them rather than just target XRP. Now, we did have precedent set here with, of course, the library token recently. They did lose in their case with the SEC, and as far as I can tell, precedent does set for XRP to be deemed a security. And do I agree with Saylor for the most part on all altcoins? I would say in general, yes, because if you're targeting, of course, Ethereum, pretty clearly looks like a security, especially without the ability to withdraw right now, as stated by the SEC. And like, obviously XRP is in that bag. We have a few things to kind of talk about here because it gets really, really interesting from the perspective of the individual. So I think I've said this before, like you can like call a spade, but don't take away my spade, right? And what I mean by that is we should still be, as a public, allowed to participate within the trading and the participation within any of these if we deem so for our own personal either gain or loss or whatever, right? We don't necessarily, I'm not for like over regulation, I suppose is what I mean by that. But that doesn't mean that you don't ignore, that doesn't mean that you don't call it the spade, right? Call a security. And then from there, we could discuss, whether or not or by how much it should be regulated by each individual government. Where things get really interesting is something like Ripple or XRP. And the reason I think XRP is a really interesting case primarily is because it is obviously an entity for cross-border payments for the banking system. It does target the banking system to a certain extent. And this is where I think coming up here in the near future, we're going to have some really interesting plays. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again because I think like driving this home is going to be really, really interesting. We have two paths set out ahead of us in general, right? And that is going to be moving towards more centralization or moving towards more decentralization. These are this is basically, are you going to be more centralized or less centralized, right? Are you going to be decentralized or centralized? Those are the two paths, and it's hitting right now primarily within the financial sector, right? So we talked about this before, right? The digital transformation, right? And we've kind of started the digital transformation already, moving like e-commerce, everything moving online, that sort of thing, our social networks, how we communicate, everything is shifted and changed in the digital era. The last piece kind of left is the financial portion to be moved over. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily everything's doomed, right, for, traditional digital infrastructure. Like, as you see now, a majority of it moved to, like, the centralization, right? What we see is larger and larger companies kind of merging and acquiring all of the digital resources, right? Your Amazon, your Google, and so on. So the fear would be that we move more towards centralization and move away from decentralization if you are fundamentally aligned with the Bitcoin white paper, traditional, basically crypto values from the very onset of crypto, kind of being spurred on by the 2008 housing crisis. And we're going to get to see how all that plays out. In fact, like right now would be, I think if you are a crypto enthusiast, this would be the most exciting time to be alive, because you're going to get to witness firsthand how this plays out. So when I talk about centralization, the biggest thing that we have to worry about, in my humble opinion, is central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Now, there's been implementation in testnets and kind of betas in China already. There is talk of it, of course, in the UK, where they've basically said they're going to copy what China is doing, move it into the UK. They've even stated to the extent that they want to add in the things like the social credit scores, etc. We'll see how much of that actually gets through and all of the details on that. In the US, we're starting with something called FedNow, which is already in testnet. They're looking at June of 2023 for deploying that, which will be a payment system, not a full-on CBDC, but one step closer. And what that does is centralize, excuse me, that centralizes the digital, kind of the power of the finances, right? Digital finance under nation states. Right now, kind of the system works in a way where you still have kind of the printing of the money, the creation, the making of the money under the nation states, and then the disbursement of the money from banks. But if we centralize further, we'll essentially end up with a position where the federal government is not only making the money, but is also distributing the money, which means you take out an entire industry, the banking industry, out of the equation. You don't necessarily want that, right, as a citizen. So when we're talking about the battle between decentralization and centralization, and especially as it pertains to XRP, which is really interesting, is that you end up really like philosophically thinking, well, you want the banks to succeed to a certain extent, because if they don't succeed, then you get one step closer to this kind of full-on centralized dystopia, potentially, right? So I think how this ends up playing out, like the frontline defense to CBDCs will be the banking system. Sal1 coming in with $100 super chat. Thank you, good sir. Says, Merry Christmas. Keep doing what you're doing. I am having fun. I do enjoy doing this. Thank you so much for that. You guys have made up all of the money. I've made more money on YouTube tonight than anywhere else today. So thank you, good sirs and gentlemen. All right. So I hope that explains sort of, and I'm kind of getting a dry throat. I wish I had some more water. I hope that explains why I think in the direction that I think when it comes to XRP. And so I suppose I should state that explicitly, right? The case against the SEC, or the case with the SEC and XRP is an important one, basically due to the fact that we are worried about how banks integrate into the digital world, right? Because right now you're kind of in a position where banks have, if you go full decentralization, banks are obsolete. If you go full centralization, banks are obsolete, right? Like that's banks, no matter what in the future, the way it appears, banks cease to exist. I think eventually, given enough time with the onset of blockchain in general, whether it moves more towards centralization or decentralization, banks cease to exist because either they're not needed because everybody is transacting peer-to-peer without the interference of banks or governments, or of course the government takes full control of all of it. So the first industry to die, the first thing that will die in this digital transformation will be banks. The question will be, how much of a buffer do banks give to the rights of the individuals when we start seeing an onslaught of regulation on cryptocurrency, specifically as it pertains to decentralized, transparent blockchains, right? Like, what kind of buffer does the banking system give to that? And does XRP end up playing a role there? And these are the questions that I have when I get into it philosophically, right? Thanks for checking out this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. You can check out the full episode here or more crypto content down here. Also, I'd like you to check out my locals page at sonofatech.locals.com, where you can become a member for free or choose to be a $5 a month supporter that unlocks additional content.